This degree of oligarchic control isn't a natural extension of capitalism or liberal democracy. It's a corrosion of it, and one which is neither desirable nor inevitable. By exercising some sustained ingenuity, the trend can be reversed. Capitalism can be recapitalized, democracy can be revived. It's worth noting, after all, that over the past half-century, capitalism has gone through quite extraordinary up-and-down experience. Over the first part of the period, everyone agreed with Burnham that it was going to death's door, deserved to be put down like a sick pet. Then it was pronounced to have made a miraculous recovery, and all its actions were greeted with wonder and admiration. Overnight, this supposedly discredited system could do no wrong. In reality, of course, the workings of the free market are as liable to perversion as any other human activity. Capitalism has been raised from the dead, but it has not been raised incorruptible. And it is time that we look more closely with an undeceived eye to see exactly what has gone wrong and how we might start to put it right. And I think this impulse is very widely spread, and it has surfaced in this extraordinary, unexpected way in the coalition government. This isn't the occasion to attempt a detailed assessment of the first 6 months of the coalition government. The immediate task of coping with the deficit is in any case so enormous, it would be premature to try to make too much of any underlying tendencies which may be becoming visible. But I think it is fair to use the word liberal of the coalition's more conspicuous gestures and actions, certainly by contrast to other recent governments. And I think that this liberalism springs not just from the personal temperaments of the coalition leaders. I think it comes from what might be called an apprehension of oligarchy, a feeling that our political and economic affairs have become too centralized. Power has been concentrated in too few hands and has as a result become less and less accountable. So it is, I think, whatever you may think of cuts, and whether we should cut early, cut hard, cut late, cut not at all, I think it's a rather refreshing experience to look at the coalition program for government, because it's a fascinating document, quite unlike anything that's been published in British politics in my lifetime. And it's not just an exchange of compromises between the two parties, but it's the outcome of a genuine dialogue over this amazing 5 days in May. A real hammering out of policies designed to address what was perceived to be the situation of the country, and also, one must add, carrying on a good deal of the impulses of the Labour government in all sorts of fields. And the impulses that vibrate through the text are predominantly against oligarchy and in favour of the devolved, the plural, and the local. We're already seeing in this autumn's programme going through the House of Commons in the next few weeks, we're seeing some of those impulses translated into legislation. For example, to give local councils, quote, a general power of competence so that they can embark on any scheme they believe will benefit their citizens without central government telling them what to do. Promises to promote radical devolution of power, greater financial autonomy, promises to return decision-making powers on housing and planning to local councils, promises to foster diversity in financial services, to create a more competitive banking industry, to promote mutual enterprises and other social enterprises, to speed the flow of credit to small businesses and so on. Now, how much of this is going to happen? Your guess is as good as mine. Will the new codes of conduct really restrain the bonus hunger of the bankers? Can the blessed sobriety of the old building societies be revived? How can you really devolve financial autonomy if you insist on freezing council tax, for example? But there are things happening. I mean, even within the great monolith of the NHS, we're already seeing nests of small-scale, independent cooperative enterprises providing nursing services, care for the elderly, and so on. I think, to be fair, these are inherited from a late-flowering impulse of the Labour government. I'm certainly not claiming that all would have voted for the coalition. After all, none of us did. But it does seem to be against a lot of the things that we can be pretty certain Orwell would have been against too. Covert surveillance by local councils of people who put their rubbish in the wrong bin. ID cards, inspectors inspecting every aspect of your work, targets and 5-year plans, central control of local councils, uniformity and so on. I think the revival of emphasis on the local would have appealed to him. And when I say the local, I mean that in every sense of the phrase. Orwell's ideal pub, the moon under water, is not just a fantasy, but a model. Although in that lovely essay he doesn't discuss where the pub, the moon, where it gets its beer from, I'm sure from internal evidence it must be a free house, another phrase which deserves mulling over. I'm certainly not going so far as to claim that all these shared impulses will come to practical fruition. But what I do say is that what Adlai Stevenson called in a different context the liberal hour seems to have come round again, and about time too. There is, I think, one more quality that we need to disinter Orwell's work and resurrect and adopt it for our own use, and that is his optimism. He is often wrongly seen as a Jeremiah in a tweed jacket. In fact, what shines through his writing, not least those essays on James Burnham with which I began, is his belief that no historical process is inevitable. That even Stalin's empire, so seemingly omnipotent and invulnerable in 1946 when he was writing, would pass away. Right at the beginning of the Cold War, it is often forgotten that Orwell told us not to despair. He said in that Burnham essay, the Russian regime will either democratize itself or it will perish. The huge, invincible, everlasting slave empire of which Burnham appears to dream will not be established, or if established, will not endure, because slavery is no longer a stable basis for human society. What is true of communism is true of oligarchy too. We make our own destiny, and we can unmake it if we really want to. Thank you very much.